Hello, everybody. It's John Hope Bryant, founder of Operation Hope. And we are sitting on the eve of the anniversary of the George Floyd murder. I just did an interview with both Mike Hill and Sharon Reed of the Black News Network this morning. And I wanted to unpack that. You know, when you do network TV, it by necessity is a short period of time. And I wanted to spend on my Operation Hope channel a bit more time explaining what I meant when I said on the interview this morning about the private sector's response and where we are today in history in the third Reconstruction, and what we must do to ensure that this moment and George Floyd's death was not in vain. Let me sort of, again, unpack backstage after the interview some of what I discussed in a bit more detail. George Floyd was a martyr. Dr. King was a prophet. They are different. Dr. King gave his life freely and prophetically outlined a vision for not just Black America, but America and the world. And like a follower of Jesus, like a disciple of Christ, he laid his life on the line. He and my mentor, Ambassador Andrew Young, who was his lieutenant and his right arm in the civil rights movement, boldly went forth in the second Reconstruction, which in my opinion was about freedom of assembly, freedom of access, freedom to choose, freedom to vote, freedom to walk, talk, wherever you want to be. It also got us from the fields to the factories as far as jobs were concerned, and even introduced us into political life. That preceded the first Reconstruction, which was really about basic physical freedom. And this is about freedom of opportunity right now, which is the third Reconstruction, from civil rights to civil rights, as I keep saying, from the mean streets to the business suites. But this is different than the '60s, when Dr. King was laying out that strategy and framing it up and moving it forward. And he had this sense that his life was in danger. And I believe on the eve of his assassination, that he knew his days were numbered. He might have known that he was going to die the next day. If you watch the video of his last speech at Mason Temple in Memphis, Tennessee, he collapsed. He had never done that before. He collapsed in his seat after his speech when he gave the mountaintop speech. It was all prophetic. And of course, he was taken from us the next day following that speech. George Floyd is a different thing. George Floyd was going on about his business, as he had every right, benefiting from the freedoms that those who came before him had afforded him. What is he, a model citizen? Nobody's business. He wasn't hurting anybody. He wasn't stealing from anybody. He wasn't robbing anybody with a gun. Was he guilty of something? Who knows? Was he on drugs? Who knows? There's a lot of people on drugs today. There's a lot of wealthy white children on drugs right now in mansions. You just can't see them. Let's not get it, this has to be a no-fault environment. We're talking about murder, right? The murder was unjustified. It was uncalled for. It was unnecessary. It was brutal. It was a public lynching. And we're better than that. And luckily, the officer was convicted, and truth and justice was served. But that's not enough for us to pivot. So George Floyd was a martyr. He gave his life, and in many ways so we can have a reset life as African Americans, because what followed that was a 400-year-old social justice reckoning for Black America, which is going on right now. And we're living in a moment in history. But history does not feel historic when you're sitting, and it just feels like another day. But that doesn't mean the moment that you're in is not historic, all right? That doesn't mean that you're not playing a moment and playing a part in this historic moment. It's just that the battlefield has moved from the streets to the business suites. And that's why you're seeing these diversity and inclusion officers being hired everywhere in corporations. That's why you're seeing 35, this is what the interview was about this morning, $35 billion invested, commitments for social justice and to Black economic empowerment in the last 8 months or so by corporations, which I applaud, by the way. And I want to see more. I'll get back to that in a moment. But back to George Floyd in this moment. George Floyd, again, was a martyr. And many, really, the 500,000 people plus who died from COVID were martyrs. Think about what's going on now in the last 8 or so months. You've had the largest health pandemic since the Spanish flu, which, luckily we're battling back with proper management from the Biden administration. So I commend them for that. And we're getting this thing in place. We even had our own first public event here at Operation Hope for Ambassador Andrew Young and Carolyn Young a couple of days ago, and got a couple hundred people together, socially distanced, vaccinated, all that kind of things. But it was, the first time in 15 months. And so we're winning this battle finally. But that was a war. Then you had this cultural war. You have this cultural war, unfortunately, of Americans against Americans, of Republicans and Democrats being locked in a really unproductive fight. No one benefits from what's going on here with us now except maybe China, because the Bible says the house divided cannot stand. So if we're fighting with each other, guess who's benefiting? Those who are not fighting with each other outside of this country who want to be us. But that's another video, which I will do. But we're in a second war, which is a cultural war with each other. And then we're in an economic war with, I believe, China and to a lesser degree with Russia. They want to be us. They want our place in the world. But we can't. They can't take it from us. We're the largest economy in the world, the sole superpower. But we can give it away if we continue to engage in silliness and stupidity on our watch. And I think that all this happening, the global health pandemic, the largest unemployment since the Great Depression, a 40-year-old reckoning on social justice for Black Americans, a basic fight for our democracy, and what that's defined as our capital was assaulted for the first time since 1812, and that was the British doing that. This was Americans against America. We can't sustain this, and I think God and the universe knew that, and so they either facilitated or allowed or instigated, probably allowed because we are silly and we will shoot ourselves in the foot, meaning humans, this moment where all these things bubbled up together. And now we have to decide who we want to be when we grow up. And, people say, oh, I hate capitalism, on this thing about the private sector contributing money to the underserved. No, you don't. People, oh, I hate rich people. No, you don't. You hate rich people until you become rich, okay? What you hate is a game system. What you hate is a system that you think is rigged against you because you want to be successful. Whatever that is defined for you. You want to be successful and aspirational. So if for no other reason, it's so that you can help other people. Well, let me tell you something. Even if you want to distribute money like a socialist, you have to first collect it like a capitalist. Okay? So we have to understand this system and how it works. I put that in my book, Up From Nothing. I went into great detail talking about 5 pillars of success, which if you follow those pillars of success, no matter where you are and who you are and where you're from, you can be successful. There's been 3 groups that have been left behind to this day since the founding of this country. African Americans that were enslaved, Native American Indians that were run off their land, and poor whites who were brought here as indentured servants. Yes, I said poor whites. There are more poor whites in America today then and now than any other group. And the largest group dying in this country are high school educated white men who are depressed. All right. So poor whites and poor blacks beating up each other and attacking each other, as I've seen in a lot of these so-called protests in the last year and a half, is ridiculous. It is ridiculous. We need to knock it off. We need to stop it. We're all in this thing together. Even middle-class folks, whether you're white, black, red, brown, or yellow, you want to see some more green. Folks got too much month at the end of their money. We need to knock it off. Stop attacking each other, hurting each other. You can take no pleasure from the fact there's a hole in my end of our boat. So there's $35 billion has been committed by the private sector for social justice. I call this era the third Reconstruction, as I mentioned earlier. Social justice through an economic lens. We have got to take this moment and make it serious. We've got to make sure that George Floyd's life was not in vain. We've got to double down and create wealth in the black community. I'm talking about black community and particularly now. Wealth in the black community. That's our 1 million black business initiative. It's a commitment to create 1 million new black businesses over the next 10 years. And we've already got close to 20,000 businesses into the program and or committed for. We've got to create financial literacy for all. We just launched that initiative with some of the biggest companies in America. My co-chair, Doug McMillan, CEO of Walmart, last week. our 10-year commitment to get financial literacy through the whole of American society. This is the civil rights issue of this generation, as a right that as important today as the right to vote was in the 1960s. To quote Ambassador Andrew Young, to live in a system of free enterprise and not to understand the rules of free enterprise must be the very definition of slavery. And then we need to get corporate inclusion. We've got to get folks who look like me and women and others up and through corporate America so that we have equity and parity and fair play. I mean, how do most people get their jobs? The career shots, an internship, an apprenticeship. Through what? A relationship. Somebody says, hey, I think you're a smart young man, young woman. Let me give you a shot. And they bring them into the company. It's not because they had a great resume, it's because they have a great relationship. Well, if you're white, you tend to know somebody who's white. I mean, it's not racism, it's sort of common sense. And you're going to bring them into the company. It's your cousin's friend, it's your brother's friend's daughter, whatever. And if you're black or you're brown or you're women, you're going to tend to probably focus on people who look like you to also bring them in the company. It's not a racist thing. It's human nature, right? It's not discrimination in a malicious way. It's human nature. And we need to have everybody at the table. Why? And why does this not hurt our white brothers and sisters? Because we're not talking about a zero-sum game. There are 4 things that have not reversed course in the history of this country. The stock market, real estate values, GDP, gross domestic product, and the future aspiration of a college-educated 55-year-old white man. They've never reversed course. They've only done better. So we're talking about expanding the table and adding a chair. Expanding a table and adding a chair, to quote my friend Stephanie Rule. There's enough room in this dream for all of us. In fact, this dream cannot survive without all of us at the table. I'm out. John Hope Bryant, let's really take this moment and grow it as if our life depends on it, because it does.